This is an amazing thing I just read. I'll paraphrase it. Not 5 minutes ago. They were talking about the black screen syndrome. And honestly, we've come to a ridiculous point because our standard is communication. And these kids would come online to a class, any class, not just a language class, and they would end up not turning on their screen, communicating at best only through the chat. And so there's in education, just think about this for just 1 second. In education, there is no communication now with the black screens. Now, can I get some thumbs up on it if this is happening to you with the black screen? Yeah, great, Catherine. Great answer. She goes like this, which is probably very accurate. I'm going to be talking about that black screen along with what Teachers Discovery has asked me to talk about as well, which is reading. Believe it or not, I found a link. A link between those two concepts of reading and the black screen. And the reason I want to talk about the black screen tonight and to work it into the piece about reading, okay, is because if we can't get their screens turned on, they're not going to be doing much reading. Okay. And there's another concept I want you to just float around in your head next half hour. I have a tendency to drone on and on, but I'm going to definitely try to keep this thing under 30 minutes tonight with room for Q&A at the end of it. But there's another thing I want you to just throw into the stew of this general discussion. You ready? I'm not going to talk about how to read. I'm going to tell you how I read, how I teach my students to read. And then you can think about that and make your own decisions. There is no one way to teach. I think each of us has been given a kind of an inner gift, which is why we're in the profession. I'm going to say that again. I think each of us possesses an inner gift to be teachers. And we have this inner gift to be a teacher. And then we read about some GPRS expert out there who says, this is the way to do it. And my answer to that is, no, it's not. There is no one way to do this work. What I would like to do is start with this sentence right here. Now talking about reading. Our students have varying backgrounds, varying backgrounds in reading. And if you've read any Krashen at all, you know that he's all over this. If a child doesn't grow up with books in their home, how can they expect to compete with kids who do grow up with books in their home? And the two of the big words I would like to address in our work tonight are simplicity and equity. So let's take those two words, simplicity and equity, in our instruction, and let's mix them into the mix tonight. Is that okay? Sound good? Okay, because we're a new country now. We've just had a massive trip to the bathroom. Excuse me for that. It's the only way I can think of it. We are unloading so much unnecessary garbage. We are, as a country, in everything, unloading so much junk right now, massive getting rid of stuff. And it's such a beautiful time, and it's a new time. And if you've been beat down by COVID and the last year and all that, if you've been beat down, how many people have been teaching more than 20 years? Just rough. Okay, so do you know what I mean by being beaten down? Okay, okay. I am surprised I am still here. And to you guys who have been teaching more than 5 or 10 years, you know exactly it was hard enough before COVID, wasn't it? Hello? It was impossible before COVID. At least that was my own experience. I was not one of these, well, I was, you know what, back to the word equity. I didn't know about equity. I used to teach for 25 years. You ready for this? 25 years, I was an advanced placement French language and literature teacher. And you know how many people I had in those classes? 2, 3. That's how many kids made it from 35 kids that started out with me as freshmen. Basically, I was going to all the kids who came in, you know, at the beginning of level 1, and I was a high school teacher mainly. I did teach 8 years in middle school. But, you know, I was basically just saying to the kids who weren't the 2 who were going to become my AP stars. And they only typically got 3s on the AP exam. So what I did 20 years ago was I had this blessed event happened. I met Susan Gross. Susan Gross is kind of like up there in my mind with Blaine Ray. She did so much I could start talking about her, but I really want to limit this to a half an hour because I know it's late. Anybody on the East Coast, you're probably thinking about going to sleep already because this is a big nightmare. And you can't wait till you go to bed. And then you got to wake up and then you say, oh, darn it. Oh gosh, the little darlings want my attention again. And I need the check, so I guess I'll do it. Okay, let's look at this concept of reading in this improbable concept of the black screen that we get so much of. And if you just tuned in later, just in the last few seconds, if you just tuned in, I wanted to make there are 4 words I really want to hit on tonight: equity, simplicity, the black screen, and reading. But that's just throw them all in a pot and let's mix it up and see what happens. Okay, here's my first point. Our students have widely varying backgrounds in reading. Does anybody do this? I know you don't. Some of you do. If you do, put the little reaction thing like a thumbs up, okay? I want to see this. How many of you guys check reading scores before the year starts? So do you have a kind of a general idea of where your students are with readings? Jennifer's being honest here. A lot of heads shaking this way. Okay, well, I never did either. But it seems to me, wouldn't it be a good idea to have an idea where our students are when reading? Because we assume so much. I'm going to say that again. We assume so much about their ability to read in their first language, right? We don't check those reading scores that they spend so much money to tabulate, collect data on. And I think that's a mistake. Second point, do you know what a learning styles inventory is? They have simple ones, and I always use the simple one. They can get really complicated with 300 questions, but basically what you want to do is you want to identify your child as either a visual, kinesthetic, or auditory learner. And when I do those learning styles at the beginning of every year, I have a wonderful couple of days because all I do is sit there and try to guess. I do it about 10 days into the school year. I stop everything and I take a day or two and I try to guess which learning style my students have. They love it. It builds community. Oh, that's a 5th word I want to really throw into the mix here is the word community. So as I build the first part of the year, the first couple of weeks certainly are not about teaching the language to me. They are about building community and trust, and they're about setting limits with my kids, making them know that they're going to be completely accountable to me on every point, on every level, every second of the entire year. They're going to be accountable to me. And if they're not, I'm going to call them on it. Okay. So we got a lot. We have 5 things going into the thing, and I'm limited to a half an hour, and that's impossible for me, but here we go. Dual learning styles inventory. What I like to do there, back to that point, is I like to have the kids, I like to guess which of the 3 learning style my kids are. And so I sit there in class and I guess even the numbers, if you know how these things work, there are numbers involved. And I guess their numbers and I find out who my auditory learners are, my visual learners, et cetera, like that. Now, why did I say those things? Because I want us to, I'm going to make a point with everything I just said, is it all leads to one thing, is that we go about our business teaching kids and we focus on the material, but not so much on the kids and who they are as human beings. I know it's kind of a cliche, I understand that. But the fact is that we can't just blithely, if that's a word, go around and assume certain things about our kids' ability to read, about who they are. And now online, we're being asked, are we, this is kind of a genuine question, I don't know the answer. Are we still expected to differentiate online? I mean, are we? Because if we are, along with all the other stuff, that's crazy. Okay, done on that kind of initial introduction, I guess you might say. If it's true that differentiating online with our kids all with different reading backgrounds, that we must respect each of their reading backgrounds, then differentiation is impossible. And it just doesn't affect reading. You know, this whole thing goes across the board with all the skills. And let me throw something in because I'm afraid I'm going to say it. Forget to say it. Listen, back in the last century, we were told to teach the 4 skills, right? Listening, reading, speaking, and listening, writing, reading, and speaking. Now, you may want to tune out on this and save yourself like a half an hour tonight. If you don't agree with this, the whole thing's not going to work. The research tells us that languages are acquired by human beings via comprehensible input. Now, if you're just checking that out, well, I don't know. You may not want to stay with us because everything I'm saying is based on one fact, and I just said it. Not comprehensible output. That's Swain. We have 3 main researchers. We have Benico Mason, we have Krashen, well, we have Chomsky, and we also have Swain. On this piece about acquiring a foreign language, it cannot be done if you focus on output. Sorry to be obnoxious about that. If you disagree with me, I'm not going to be talking about it. You know, I'm not going to be talking about any forms of output. Hold it off. Start doing that stuff in level 2. Generally, in my own experience, at the end of April, this is a weird thing to say, but I've done it so many years. I've noticed that if you don't force kids to speak, by the end of April in their 2nd year, they start speaking naturally in an unforced way because they want to and they haven't had enough input. Massive amounts, that's in that Ohio State professor who wrote about the fact that a trickle of output follows, I'm not saying it right, but you know, you've heard this before, a trickle of output follows massive amounts of input. Now these are just basic, I'm just throwing out a bunch of sentences to make sure we're on the same page, because if you're trying to get your kids right now, especially online, to speak or do writing in the 1st year, it's just, the 1st year is for auditory input here. And then it gradually moves around to the piece we're talking about tonight, the reading, the visual, comprehensible input. Okay, let's go to the next point. I'm going to make a point here that's, I think, really important, and it touches on the word differentiation. When you get a group of students online and they're looking at you and you're supposed to be teaching a foreign language, that in itself is comical to me. It's hard enough in a classroom. But when a group of students is looking at you in these little boxes, just like we're all doing tonight, what are you supposed to do to teach them the language? Now, if you don't check their backgrounds, and if you don't know pretty much where each kid is in terms of their L1 reading skills, okay? In terms of their L1 reading skills, then you're faced with a bunch of faces looking at you where all the kids are either at the same level. That's the assumption, isn't it, when they make us teach on Zoom? Oh, they're all at the same level. They're pretty much close together. After all, they've been growing up together and being in the same classes and they know each other. And so they're probably all reading the same. No, they're not. We can't reach and teach our kids all together like that. And we cannot teach them individually using the mythical tool of differentiation. So what do we do? What's the solution to that? Do you see the problem? Does everybody agree that that's kind of a problem? That they all have different abilities and capacities to read, and they vary widely. So what's the solution? What's the solution when a few kids take over the class and you run with them? You don't have to raise your hand. I'm not going to ask you to put your hand up or not on this. But take a good look at yourself. Do you, this is a challenge question, do you or do you not favor the few? There's nobody else in the room that's going to go with you. You're online. You've got to earn a paycheck. I'm happy for every little, I used to be when I was teaching the old way 20 years ago, I found out about CI, but there were 25 miserable years before that. And I always went with the few. Now this concept of teaching only the few is key. What are you going to do to reach your whole group? And I'm asking for suggestions. The chat feature, yeah, Kimberly Anderson just said something about the chat feature. Can we use it this way for you to throw stuff in the chat right now? Because I'm asking a genuine question. I'm not sure I have the answer to it. You know, what do you do if you end up teaching the few in one of these black screen things? First of all, how many, well, hey, Anne Marie, how are you? I'm gonna go look at the chat right now and see what, 82, 84, wow. Okay, here you go. Bailey says, I call on each student, thank you. Small group check-ins. That's from, thank you, Angel. Breakout groups to decide on part of a story. Breakout groups work for you guys? I'm seeing a lot of this. How many people, I can only see part of the group here, but how many people really depend on breakout? Here's something. I have students share their work on camera. They earn points for sharing work. Okay, thank you. That was Mandy. Listen, if we had 3 hours, I would want to go there to these chat comments. We're not going to have time, I can tell. Look, popsicle sticks. Okay, this is falling right into my point I'm trying to make. If you can see where I'm going. I am not knocking your, and I say this word with the deepest respect, because only a teacher can appreciate what you're all going through right now. But I have to say this. Look, video recordings each night for homework. Thank you, Pat. I can't say your name. Beautiful name, Patxi. She wrote the word simplicity, and that's where I'm going.
Patsy?
That's no, it's Patsy. It's Patxi though.
Okay.
My wife Holly's here.
Just say I said it's Patsy.
She said it's Patsy. Okay. Here's another one. I ask a question and tell the class that I expect everyone to answer in the chat. I expect everyone to answer. Bad words for a teacher who's forced to teach online when it's very difficult to teach in a brick and mortar building as well. I don't, you know what? My advice, don't expect anything from these kids because they're incapable of giving it. They will not. They're just going to go around in their dangerous worlds of looking at a screen all day. They're going to tune us out, and we're going to be left holding the bag and then having discussions like this. Let's get back to the point because of the lack of time. I would love to address all of this, but the person who won my heart wrote the word Patsy, the word simplicity. Simplicity. I know a teacher in Little Rock, Arkansas, who is so good, but she's working herself out of the career, out of the profession, because she's got the online stuff, she's got the curricular stuff, she's the department chair. She may be in this group here, and she's also very much big on the research and very up to date about that kind of stuff. So I mean, it's all consuming 24 hours a day almost. And I'm worried about all our mental health. And as Pat says, we're going with the word simplicity here. And that's one thing. Remember, that was in my little introduction there. I talked about the things I want to kind of throw in a big pot and mix up tonight. You guys are not, you should not be expected to do what you're having to do in terms of organizing your online instruction. You should be able to teach in a relaxed way without getting all messed up and having to do this and that and check on that kid and that homework and all that. I'm proposing tonight a way to not have to do any of that stuff via the sacred word of simplicity. That's what I'm going to throw your way tonight. That's my main goal, is to throw simplicity at you, if you'll allow that. So I'm just going to make my big point here. We need to find a way to teach, to retool in response to COVID that does not favor the few. We, instead of doing all these different things, giving homework, grading video recordings that they make for us. I don't know what, in light of what I said earlier, can you see where I would be against all kinds of them making output recordings? Right? I mean, seriously, well, why are you giving kids homework in the first place in this time? I'm an Alfie Kohn guy. You don't have to agree with me. Just let me kind of throw all of this stuff out. We need to find a way to teach that does not favor the few, because when we favor the few, they're fine. But the other 30 kids in our online classes we're all of a sudden, here's another person, it takes too damned long, Kimberly said. Takes too long. All of these things, we don't have to do all these things. Now listen to this. This is Nikki. I ask a question and tell the class that I expect everyone, that's a bad word. We're not going to get it. So what we need to do, instead of focusing on the kids, on what the kids are not doing, didn't that kind of ring right with your, did anybody resonate with that? Instead of focusing tonight on what the kids are not doing, let's get them, all of them, to focus on what we're doing in the group. Possible? No, Ben, you're a little off on that. They're not going to pay attention. Comments? I'm going to look in the chat on that sentence. Listen to this, Catherine. We must assign work every class meeting day. Every time you meet with a class, it sounds like you're in a block, Catherine. You must assign work. Ain't gonna do it. Ain't gonna care about it. You guys, I'm sorry. I taught in India for a year after I retired at the American Embassy School in New Delhi, India. And I do this a lot. I'm just gonna have to do this. Watch. To each one of you, I am so sorry that you've gotten into a situation that is impossible to do. You can't expect anything from a kid. You can't require anything from a kid. So let's just drop that and figure out a way to teach. We're gonna have to retool here. You gotta be open to new things. And right now, I wanna present something to you that's new. And I can tell you I've written about 10 or 12, or I don't know how many books I've written about comprehensible input. And the reason I've written those books, every single one of them, is because I was trying to learn about it, and I learned by writing. I learned by writing. And so I wrote all these books over the last like 14 years or so. I've written like all these books. And not one of them, even the big CI book, which Charles tells me is pretty popular with Teachers Discovery, did not meet the mark. It did not get over the bar. What is the bar? The bar is the reason you tuned in tonight, to not feel so freaking crazy about this job. The bar has to be lowered for us and for our kids. What are the few, remember I mentioned the few kids in the room? They are, in a sense, are a very dangerous group of kids in the classroom, because they just suck all the energy over to us. And if we're not aware, we end up teaching those 5 kids, and all of a sudden, all those, I mentioned this earlier, all the other kids are gone. They're just, their screens are black and they're gone. Here's a way that I have of reaching all the kids. And again, remember at the beginning, I said, there's no one way to teach. We all teach differently. So in offering you this thing I'm going to put up on a screen share right now, please understand that it's not the way. If somebody's out there on the internet saying they know how this stuff works, they don't. And tell them to shut up. Because each of this, the only way I can describe this is we prayerfully go through every day. In my class, that was 35. In my case, that was 35,000 classes. I figured it out in paper one time. Can I get a round of applause for that? Come on, thank you. 35,000 classes, and every day was a prayer. God, please help me get through this, because I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just making that shit up. And I was kind of like hoping to get out of it. Have you ever hoped mid-career to get out? Maybe I'll get out of this, but you never did. That's because you guys are the Marines. You're the few. You're the proud. You're the ones who can actually keep doing this work. You know why? Because somebody has to do it. Because the kids don't have any adults in their lives. And so when you show up as a strong adult and you know what you're doing in your classroom, they're going to pick up on that. And God bless those little kids. They're going to go home turn off the screen that day, and they will have had one positive experience with one of their teachers in which they felt they could do it. Now, how does this relate to the concept of the few? The few mess this up. We teach those 5 kids and we let the other kids go, and they think we don't care about them. And what we need is a method or some approach using comprehensive. I think the unifying thing here is comprehensible input, right? Is that what we're assuming, right? Because I'm not going to be talking about I think I've made some other webinars like last summer on CI, which Charles would know more about. But they're there, and they're different webinars. The subject here, and don't think I've forgotten reading. I haven't. But can you imagine, wow, a child having one great experience during the day because of you? I feel like I used to coach cross country and track in high school, and it's like I feel like I'm giving a pep talk before the state meet. We can do it, you know? But what kind of a coach would I be if I only talked to my top in cross country, the top 7 runners are involved in the scoring of a cross country meet, and I have 20 kids on the team? What about when those kids come running by at the end of a race, having run a 30-minute 5K, which is pretty slow? Do they count? Come on, give me some kind of sign here. You got reactions, you got this, you got that. Do those kids count? Do you forget those kids? Do you forget those other kids? Wait, Jennifer, what was that? This, that, or what? Here's the question. Do you forget all those other kids that are disenfranchised that go to the black screen? You don't. Okay, all right. Okay, so let's drop that point, go to my little screen share because I'm running out of time. Here we go. I don't know how I'm gonna do this because I'm really bad at it. Really bad. Did I press? Can you see that? Did I even go to screen share? You're not seeing anything. I think I went to the, hang on. Okay, can you see that?
Yep, there you go, that's working.
Okay, I think I need to get out of the chat real quick. Well, no, I can't. Okay, is this big enough for you to see the little words? Yes or no? I can't.
Yeah, we can see it.
Everybody can see.
Mhm.
Okay, can you see
Yep.
the cursor?
Yes.
I don't know if anybody knows this, but at least on a Mac, little details, you can make that cursor as big or small as you want. This is as big as it gets. All right, this is okay, you ready for this? This is a visual graphic, a representation of where my 40 years in this, 45 years now, in this career have led me. Every class, all those 35,000 classes have led me right to this, because this is a curriculum that's not based on linear time. Now, this month, they're gonna learn adverbs, and then next month, there'll come a point where they learn object pronouns, and I'll really get into that. And then when they're in level 4, I'm gonna teach them all about the wonderful pluperfect subjunctive and show off how smart I am. That linear, I submit to you that that the old linear textbook base curriculum, now where you learn this first and then you learn that and then you cover that, you cover that and you cover that, is a farce. It's been a farce for 100 years and it will continue to be a farce, because you cannot mix, and this is my opinion, please understand, I'm just giving my opinion. You cannot mix CI with the textbook. One or the other. Have you ever heard somebody say, well, I need a comprehensible input activity that I can go by on Teachable that I can use to teach object pronouns? Has anyone ever, you know what I'm talking about? Please, I just say this with great respect, please do not think that comprehensible input and all its miracles can be effective if you connect comprehensible input to a traditional curriculum. This is a non-linear circular curriculum in which if you can, I know I asked this again, I forgot what the answer was. You can see the cursor? Yes?
Yes.
Thank you. See this? Look at this word here. Look, can you see these words?
Yes.
Thank you. What we do is we start with an image. Okay, don't want to talk about that, but we start with an image. And basically when we use an image, we're able to effectuate a strong emotional response from our children that keeps them from turning off the black screen, becoming black screen thing. We start with this image. It used to be called circling with balls. For those of you who know that middle school kids, when I was teaching in a middle school, do nothing but play sports, seems like. It's now called Card Talk. One word images. I created those in 2003. And one word images are great places to start to get kids to keep from turning off their screens. And individually created images are more powerful than one word images. This is the create phase. So what we do, and what I'm going to try to talk about reading tonight, is that we start with, ready for this word, auditory input that is based on something the kids drew. It's not based on a story. I think it's different because when you create a story, we can talk about that for 7 hours right now. But when you create a story, it's not as interesting as something the kids create themselves through art. So this is input, comprehensible input, creation of an image, 3 different ways to do that. Then you do review, I won't go into that. Then you create the actual this is auditory input, listen to this carefully. Auditory input, visual input, and then here are the 9 things that I wanted to show. I remember what I said earlier on. I said, what I want to work with you guys tonight is I used to have about 150 of these over the years. And these are the big time reading strategies that I use. There are only 9 of them. Can you imagine I've thrown away over 100 of those things? Activities. Can I make a point about too many activities? I'm going to make it anyway. Have you ever gotten drowned in activities? Have you ever gotten to where you have so many things to do that you've collected with so many workshops over so many years that you literally don't know what you're doing? This to me, TD Teachers Discovery asked me to talk about reading. These are the only reading things I do. And I do them in the same each trip around the star. I go like this. I go from one of these 3 up to here, and then I go through here on the extent phase, and I forget it. I'm done with that journey around the star. It keeps my day simple. I always know where the kids always know where they are on this thing. And these are the 9, you know what, in order to save time, because I think there's no way we have any time to go into these things. There are 2 books that this is all related to. And if you look at that, this is the second book. It says book 2 activities. So where there's no yellow line is where we work to get out of the hell state that we're all in right now. We just go around like this. We do all these reading activities and we move up. Everything on this chart is of my own invention except for that one. And that one from TPRS. Okay, let's get out of here. Here I am. Yes, Cynthia Lorenzo says it's difficult to use comprehensible input with Zoom. I just showed you in a general, fast, really quick way how I make comprehensible input work with Zoom. It works. And I think there's some people here in the group tonight who have taken a Zoom class with me over the summer. And then I've just finished one with some teachers in Israel. And the bottom line is it works for them. That star works for people online. And I want to say that. Now, let's go back. And let's go to, so I just showed you what I do normally in reading with comprehensible input on that star, those 9 activities. We can check that off. We've covered that. The other thing about reading is what do you do with FVR, free voluntary reading? And I'm sure you're all in different spaces with FVR, but it should be done. I don't think it should be done very intensely until 2nd year, maybe 2nd semester of the 1st year. But I want to say that reading those novels, you know what I'm talking about? Most of you know what I'm talking about, those novels, right? should be put off because the kids, here's a big point. The kids have to feel confident. And when you read those novels, they don't know all the words. 20 years ago, the concept was this and it failed. And TPRS, the idea was, well, you do a bunch of stories about each chapter. Am I getting any resonating responses from this? The concept in TPRS is that you create a story. I'm sorry, you read a chapter, and before you read a chapter in one of those novels, you have to create a bunch of stories in order to understand the vocabulary. Does that make sense? That's the old concept. It never worked for me. I tried it for 15 years. So that's why I'm saying we have a lot to talk about with FVR, but I'm going to kind of like shorten everything right now. If you really want to know how I personally feel about reading, because I feel like I'm feeling really stressed with time right now. I just last night, in order to test the timing on this thing tonight, I just spent 2.5 hours last night talking about reading, and I put it into my YouTube channel. So if you've got an extra 2.5 hours, that's really everything I'm going to be talking about. Everything I want to talk about is covered in that 2.5 hours. That's on my YouTube channel. But Charles, I have a recent, okay, so Teacher's Discovery is recent. Let's talk about FVR one more minute. They do a thing called Flangu. Has anybody heard of it? It's kind of new, but Charles, you know what?
Yeah.
I like it because it's simple. It goes back to that word simple. Remember that word simplicity? I mean, unless you guys have an extra hour a day to go in there and fiddle with all the little gadgets and bells and whistles and all the things that you have to do in some of those digital reading products out there. So I sat in on a couple of Charles's, what are they called, Charles, on Saturday mornings?
Oh, the Flangu coffee break is what I call it.
And they were only a half an hour long. So I went in there, and in keeping with the concept of simplicity, I like that. Charles, you're right there. Why don't you talk about a second on FVR?
Oh, sure. Well, for anybody who would like to try it out anyway, Flangu is it's kind of like Netflix, but for readers. I have an entire library right now of Spanish readers, and we've got French and German on the way that are scheduled to be released, I believe, before February. So sometime between January and February, we're going to see a whole bunch of French and German titles show up. And I'm happy to give anybody a walkthrough, a demonstration, anybody who'd like to see it. It's really simple, which was the whole point when we put it together. We just wanted something that was going to be very simple and easy to use. And I also have some free accounts that I can give out. So I'll toss that in the chat for anybody who'd like to just try it out. Even if you are a French teacher or a German teacher and your books are not there yet, you can still log in, check it out, see what's there, and just kind of get used to or familiar with what's there. And once the French and German titles arrive, I'll extend your account again. And then I'll make sure that when they get there, you still have a full month so you can really try it out and see what it's all about. Once you log in for the first time, if you click on the little button at the top that says need help, I think it's under your name. So you click on your name and there's a little drop down and one of the buttons says need help. And there's a whole bunch of video tutorials that I made that kind of take you through all the different things. And each tutorial is only like 2 minutes or 5 minutes long. So they're really short, but they'll help to get you going. And I am always available, of course, if you ever have questions, ever want to learn anything more about it, you can always reach out to me. I'm super, super easy to get a hold of. And I will put some information right in the chat. And I think that's all I have to say about that.
Okay, thanks, Charles. I know
welcome.
we're going to go I've been feeling the pressure of the 45 minutes and we're almost there, but can I read a few more things? Can I just read a few more sentences off my notes? And then after that, just points I'd really like to make about reading. And after that, we can go to some Q&A. Does that sound good to kind of wrap this up? How about this for a sentence? I love this sentence. It's really a cool sentence. The better the foundation in listening, the easier it is to read. You know how Sesame Street works? Mom has the picture, the little ball, there's a picture of a ball, and then there's the word ball below it. And the kid doesn't really notice the ball. They just see the picture of the ball and they're sitting on their mommy's lap and they go, ball. And on an unconscious level, they're learning how to read, right? One word, then more than one word. It's a question. Thumbs up, thumbs down, whatever you want to say. Do we give that deep listening background so that our kids can read by making associations with the words, the squiggles they see on the paper and the image in their mind? And that's, by the way, why I started that star thing off with an image and not with the idea of trying to do a story. It's too hard. If any of you have ever tried, and even if you're successful at it, more power to you, because most of us, me included, never really could make TPRS storytelling work. I'm sorry, I couldn't. It was too hard. It was too pressure. There's too much pressure. Now I've written 10 books about it. That's why I start with images, and I've gone to a different curriculum altogether. Here's another sentence I'd like to share. The failure of the modern CI movement in the face of the pandemic-induced online instructional setting. I'll start that again. The failure of the modern CI movement in the face of the pandemic-induced online instructional setting is largely a failure to align with the research about how people actually learn languages. And to put that into 10 seconds, they listen, then they read, then they start writing a little bit, maybe, and then at some point along that continuum, depending on how they're wired individually, they start speaking. And that's why I said earlier, please, out of love and respect for these children, please, I'm just going to be honest, stop trying to get them to speak in first year. And stop trying to get them to write in first year. They can't. They haven't got enough wiring. So that's why I say is if we can just actually stay in, that's another thing I wanted to throw in the pot tonight, is how do we get people to respect the research that says people only learn languages, only acquire languages through input first. Writing and speaking, I have on my tab. If I had figured this out 50 years ago, I would have been a very happy person. At the end of my career, I finally figured out that you can't ask kids for any kind of output in their first year. They need massive amounts of input. 1,000 hours, 10,000 hours is what you need for a modern language to master the language. 24,000 for a language whose script is not a modern language, like Mandarin or something. 24K, 24,000 hours. And how many hours do we have in a typical year? I figured it out. It's around 125 hours. And that's if we're giving them comprehensible input the entire period for that whole year. 4-year program, 500 hours, 125 times 4. 500 is 1/20th of 10,000. So we have 1/20th of the time we need to be able to get our kids strong in the language. Now, look in the mirror tonight and say to yourself, why am I working so hard? I only have 20. It's like somebody assigning you to do a job and you only have 5% of the time you need to do it. It's Charlie Chaplin, Modern Times. So I'm asking you to do some extreme things. Probably some people here tonight getting a little, whoa, that's a little strong, Slavic. Yeah, it is. We need to work on, and this is something I haven't even touched on tonight, emotional connection with the group. Community. Chomsky's line, I can't remember it exactly, I didn't memorize it, but Chomsky back in the 60s said, acquiring a language is a normal activity that occurs when people function normally in society without focusing on the language, and that sets up Krashen, you know. And Krashen's main message is you learn a language by focusing on the message. Right now, you're not focused on the language. So you need to change the way you think a little bit, you know. Do you see yourself able to communicate with your students in such a way that they understand what you're saying and want to listen to it? Do you see how that plays back onto what we were talking about at the beginning of the session? The idea being that they won't turn their screens off if they feel that they are interested. And everybody can learn a language. It's those 5 kids again. The 5 kids get us going so fast. And kids, they're not stupid, they're slower processors. And so when you speak too fast, you lose them. By the way, Susan Gross taught me this. If you are teaching a CI class and you're trying to build a story with kids and you see that they're not with you, the reason they're not with you is because they don't understand. So it's incumbent upon you as a comprehensible input teacher to make sure that you understand. And that means slowing down. And it's not, you can't just slow down and make it work though. There's so many other things. I just don't have time. I feel so handcuffed. Let me throw this. So if you do auditory input in the form of creating stories from a story script, if you use Anmatava stuff, from 1 word or 3 words as they do in TPRS, they still target words in TPRS, or from an image like I do, where my starting point for a story is always an image as per that star. Wherever you start, you need to know that you have to go in order with large amounts of comprehensible input this way, auditorily, and then gradually you introduce reading through those activities, because in those activities on that star, they always generate auditory comprehension. That's you're doing that. And then by the end of that auditory comprehension, they start reading on the way around the star. And when they start reading, they do it because guess what they're reading? They're reading stuff they already experienced like lots of input on. Auditory input precedes visual input. They've done a lot of understanding of the story, the text you made from the image on that star, and they're happy and confident. And that's the biggest word, isn't it, of all, is that all, if the kids are happy and confident, they're not going to turn their screen off. They're not going to flip you off, as it were. When they flip off their screen, they're flipping you off. And so we're the adults. We have got to figure out a way to reach them. That's with the black screen. I'll stop talking about that. But the kids will come in if you gain the confidence in yourself to be able to reach them with something interesting. Doesn't that make sense? It's kind of a hard pill to swallow, but doesn't that make sense? If what you offer them is interesting, you're good. Kids are not stupid. If they're learning something they don't want to learn, they're not, if you're putting them in a situation where they don't want to learn it, they're going to turn the screen off and it'll be just like any other class. And yet, my point is that we have a chance. We have a chance to pull these kids a little bit out of the hell state, purgatory state that they find themselves in right now online. We're all in deep stuff. But I believe there's hope. I believe we can do it if, so does you all get that the auditory foundation is the key? Okay, now look, I could just keep going on. I've got tons and tons of notes, but you can, I'm out of time. So Q&A, anybody have any ideas of what you want to do now? There are too many messages to, Does anybody have anything they want to like really get into right now? Charles, I'm doing the best I can with the time. I'm talking fast. Doing everything I
It's,
can.
it's okay. I think we're all right.
I have a
I would like
question.
to ask a question, yes.
Okay, let's fire in with some questions here.
All right.
Okay, I'll go. Thanks. Hi, my name's
Kristen.
Kristen, and I was wondering how you feel about response in L1.
Oh, that's a good question. I don't mind it. It shows me they're aware. I mean, I certainly won't accept an L2 response. 'Cause, you know why? Because that's like asking a 6-month-old child to recite the Declaration of Independence. So as far as your question goes, yeah, I'm okay with it. Next
Did
question.
are you saying that, and my name is Greta, by the way, I don't know why I'm, Marta and I are coworkers and great friends, and I totally adore her. I
Who?
don't know, maybe Marta Melara, who's in another page, so you'll see two of us. My name is Greta, and my big question was, okay, L1 is acceptable up until which level?
Well, now, okay, this is my opinion based on my own 40 years. Okay. I don't know, but my intuition based on my own experience. Say the question again. I want to make sure I get it exactly.
L1 responses, and I see them, yeah, I could see them in low, novice, low, I could see all those things happening at that level. But when is L1 no longer acceptable? Or is it always acceptable? Because
It's always acceptable because a kid may go through 4 years and not be able to, he or she would be a slow processor, would be a person whose mind doesn't work like other people's minds. Einstein was what, 5 or 6 years old before he uttered a word? So we can't go saying these kids are stupid when they don't come out with all this wonderful,
I'm not on duty.
polished target language speech, you know? I once had a kid who would sit in my classroom and never say a word, never said a word until the second year, second semester. He said about, I think I tried to count the words. It was like 15 words in a row in beautiful French. And I had to actually go in the classroom and cry so they wouldn't see me cry. Because I realized that that kid had been sitting hanging loose. I knew he was smart because he got 70 out of 70 on the national French exam that year. But I said, is this kid ever going to talk? And when he finally came out, it was a natural, his mind knew when and how to order the synaptic connections and all the neurology. His mind for him did with the input what it wanted to do. And that for him was holding off for about a year and a half, or more than a year and a half. But then when he finally started speaking, it was a work of art. It was beautiful. I started crying. I said, they're going to see me cry. I came back in and I said, look, you guys, there's something really wonderful happened here. Because I didn't know that Ted was learning anything. So a fourth year student may have, especially if you use comprehensible input in the form of auditory and reading for, months and months and months, and how many, 3.5 years, may not say a word until they're ready. So the answer to your question is, when are they ready? We don't know, because we can't go in inside each kid's brains and measure the neurology and pick it apart and grab it and take this piece off and control everything. I think that's one of the greatest problems we have. And I'll leave the answer to that simple thing is that we try to control too much. All we have to do is get something going, see where it goes, which I know conflicts with the targeting concept that's so popular in TPRSCI these days, except for I've written a 75 point, I have made 75 points in a big article, 75 of why targeting is bad. This was a big thing we got into with Krashen in 2008. I'll leave it there. Next question. Was that okay, Greta, for an answer?
Yes, thank you. I'm
Okay.
also reading the chat and seeing what others are also sharing from their perspective. So yes, thank you so much.
And if you want more of that, I've just 2.5 hours worth on what I did last night on my YouTube. Who's
I would
next?
like to ask a question,
Marie?
if possible. Oh
Marie.
my God, I don't want to open my camera, but whatever.
Go ahead.
Oh my God. Hi. I would like to know your thoughts. I teach in Texas, and so students can take, of course, languages in middle school. I teach Spanish for high school right now. And I always feel that in high school, they could get more advantage on the language because it's closer to what real life is going to look like, right? And then, but I have taught AP levels in middle school, and my way of seeing it is that it would be perfect, considering what you said about the amount of time that they would need to feel comfortable with the language.
Right.
And I think that's awesome and wonderful to hear, because I've always thought that way, and it's impressive how they don't listen. Of course, you have parents, you know, like, no, but they need the credits and the high school credits to get it over with, and blah blah blah. So I always consider that it would be great if students at a middle school level could have like those Spanish 1, 1A, 1B, really nail that Spanish 1A and 1B through all of the years in middle school. And then when they go to high school, then it can start counting as high school credits. And then they can take advantage and take it to the next level, you know, AP classes, Spanish 5 and whatever, because it is very interesting. And I think that trying to sell a program of the advantages of getting to a higher level in a language, it's much easier if they feel really comfortable at a middle school level, you know? So I think it goes too fast. When I taught AP language and culture 3-4 years ago at an 8th grade, they were not prepared for the themes. They couldn't get engaged in a conversation.
They're not prepared for the themes because the themes are garbage.
Well,
if you have at the end of 3 years, 3/4 of 500 hours, because in a 4-year program, you have 500 hours.
right.
So that's 375 hours you've had to start them off with the language. And then if they're going to become masters of the language, they will have gone from 375 hours to 10,000 hours. That gap, that's why I was saying earlier, everything has to do with their confidence. And in a middle school, if you build their confidence to the point where they feel good with the way people acquire languages through their ears and through their reading, auditory and reading input, comprehensible input, and you make them feel good about themselves in middle school, in those 2 classes, the way it's set up in middle school, I know, then you could probably give a couple more years of comprehensible input in levels 1 and 2 in the high school. And then you can go crazy with the grammar.
Right.
But if you
So
start,
we agree.
Yeah, sorry.
We agree then.
Yeah, so if you start out with a lot of grammar in middle school, you're going to run out of kids real fast. You're not even going to have an AP program because they're going to quit, because they're going to say, what is this? I don't care about what goes in that blank. All I care about is I want to talk. I'm having fun. I just want to go to class. And when I say talk, I mean listen, really, and then you wait for that natural process. Who's next?
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I think the thing I want to really drive home tonight is the kids need compassion. They need to be able to know they can do it. We need to dumb it down. We don't need to have a program in our school where only the few rise to the top. We're losing an entire, and have been for the last 50 years, an entire nation of children who drop out after level 1 or 2. And so if we can give them, and that's why I'm touting that star, because it's the first time in my whole career and being involved in comprehensible input for the last 20 years of it. And I'm talking 24/7. I'm a crazy man when it comes to I think it was because my mentor was Susan Gross, and she's, if you know her, she's just incredible. And you start looking at comprehensible input and you say, this is a gift. This is really cool stuff. How do I master it? And I've been working at 20 years to try to figure out how to master it. And I didn't start to get into the good stuff except for like 5 years ago. Okay, next.
I have a question, Ben.
Please, thank you,
So
Sandra.
how do you, I love this idea, but how does one overcome like the grading requirements that a district has and those expectations when you're trying to bring this in?
The short answer is that we're going to change the way we think of the concept of what a curriculum is. For 100 years, we had the textbook or those old remember when the word grammar used to mean a grammar book? We have focused on the structure of the language for so long. And now Krashen comes 40 years ago now. He started his research around 1970, over 40 years. And he came up with this idea that people don't learn a language through studying grammar or the structure and focusing on form. They acquire the language by hearing it and then reading it. So the short answer is we need to redesign our curriculums. The second thing I would say is that, Sandra, when you have a department that has failed to recognize this miracle of comprehensible input, you're forced to work on a daily basis with people who are watching over your shoulder to what you're doing. There's a person in this meeting right now who's had a heck of a difficult time with that. And yet she's right. So, because by the way, the word grammar does not even occur in ACTFL's pages anywhere. I challenge you to go find it. And the word grammar is exactly the other direction for where we want to go. So that's kind of like one answer. I don't know. I think, Sandra, the way to really approach this is to say long-term, we need a different concept of what a language curriculum is based on research, not based on the existence of the textbook for the last 50 to 100 years. The thing is that the textbook is connected to the concept of profit motive. I mean, textbooks, Krashen told me one time, he just kind of looked up randomly. It was weird. And I was standing in front of me, sitting down. He looks up and he says, do you know how much money the textbook industry is every year, Ben? I said, I have no idea. $1 million? He says 1.3 billion. So if you want to know if there's anybody out there right now that doesn't want us to be talking like this, they're corporate interests. I mean, how long are we as a country across the board going to sell out to corporate interest? When are we going to take the interests of this is a leitmotif that you can say goes across the entire spectrum of American education, and not just American education, but everywhere. It's all about selling books. I just don't think that we can possibly, in good faith, sell our kids out like that.
May I ask a question or a clarification? You mentioned changing curriculum. When we are expected to complete certain levels at a certain time, so that students can progress and they can move along. And I understand Krashen, and I've been there, I've attended, I've listened, I've read, and I learned the language by reading myself when I immigrated into this country, when there was no such thing as bilingual education. And I understand that, but should, instead of curriculum then, would it be better to call it outcome? What do we expect? What is it that we want our students who spend all these hours with us, and in most cases 4 years, right, in high school? Right. Most students actually stay,
I mean,
for 2 years just to fulfill requirements sometimes, or maybe not if they're going into a junior college. But then what is it? If it's not curriculum, then maybe it's outcome. What is it that we want? What is our goal? as educators of a foreign language? What is it that?
I can only tell you from me. Okay.
Mhm.
I can only tell you my own thoughts. Number one, for my whole career, I watched kids struggle to keep up with the few. Number two, I concluded that the reason I didn't have any kids in my upper class, my AP classes, I concluded that the reason they weren't there was because they didn't feel good about themselves as language learners. I had to look in the mirror and say to myself, what am I doing that's causing kids to not feel any joy in my classroom? Number four, when I accepted that in the year 2000, I realized that I was working in a stacked, playing with most of the kids in the classroom. I was playing with a stacked deck. You're not going to win because these kids over here are going to win. So that was 20 years ago. So at that point, I decided to go after a different concept of curriculum. And it's purely in Krashen's ballpark, you know what the curriculum, you know what he said is the curriculum is the language, or I think is the language is the curriculum. Now, if the language is the curriculum, that answers your question. Outcomes is a good word, but I think my prayer for myself 20 years ago was find a way to make sure that the kids feel good about themselves, and so teach in a compassionate way. I used to be one of those big dudes on like, hey, all my kids have to get the high scores in the national French exam this year. And I did that. I played that game for a quarter of a century, and they did. But it was always teaching to those few. So what we need to do, in conclusion about my own decision to reach out in a more compassionate and selfless way, was to do whatever I could to getting closer to my dream of being able to say to my students, you're okay the way you are. You're perfectly capable of, you're wired to learn a foreign language. You're already fluent in one language. And when my newly arrived kids, and I used to teach on the west side of Denver, Federal Boulevard, it's a huge 99% Latino. And I would say to those kids, you guys have two languages and now you're learning a third. That's fantastic. And everything I've been doing is all about getting confidence into the kids' hearts. And so that's the long answer. The short answer is the language is the curriculum, and ACTFL's not doing enough to state that. I love their standard of communication. I love what it's based on, the 3 modes of communication. Won't go into that. I don't like their 90% position statement on using the target language. That they say, those people, they say use 90% of language in the classroom. It's really stupid. I think 50% is enough. Just don't go back and forth like every 5 seconds you go English and target language, English target. Don't do that. Once you get there, stay there like 10 minutes or 15 minutes. And then if you talk 15 more minutes about the football game last night, do that. Builds community. Take pressure off yourself. That was a lengthy answer. Sandra, did you get your answer?
I think so. I don't know if there are other colleagues who just feel like I do. I mean, I just feel so stuck because I have this department and there's this curriculum, and I have this one colleague who's so focused on grammar, and I just want to do things differently because it's just not working. It's like sucking the life out of the kids, I think. And
horrible.
I want to change, but I'm also scared of losing my job because
listen, this is very important. Whatever your department tells you to do, no matter if they're like their minds are still living in the 1950s, do it, because you don't want to lose your job. then what I tell people to do is work with some comprehensible input for the last 10 minutes of class. So okay, we've learned the important stuff, 5 minutes left in class. We did all the important game. Now let's just play around. Does anybody have a picture of something they think's cool? And then that's what that star does. You launch, you go around, and by the time you're done with your first journey on the star, working from an image, not a story concept, not from any target words, just from something they created, you'll see something. But no, please do not say, hey, I'm going to try this. That's what Susan Gross, I always agreed with everything Susan Gross ever said, that the one thing she said, just dive right in and start doing stories, and I said, no, crazy stuff. You got to go slow with this stuff. If you've been teaching grammar for 20 years and all of a sudden you're going to go, well, we're going to do something different. No. This is very simple work, but it requires an internal change before you do it. Hey, Ryan.
Hey, Ben.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, it's okay. Ben, I was just going to say that we're reaching about 9:15, so it's actually getting pretty late over here.
As fast as I could.
That's okay. That's okay. I think we did really well tonight, and I can't thank you enough for coming out and doing this for us. This was huge.
Oh, my pleasure.
Wonderful. I know there are more questions, and I know that that time is always a factor, but if you want, you can email those questions over to me. I can get them over to Ben, and then he can reply to those questions. Is that right, Ben? You'll be able to reply to questions if I send them over to you?
Where should I reply, though, on my website?
Oh, I'm just going to have people email me because it'll be easy. And then once they email me, I'll just forward them over to you with their information, and then you can email them, and
Okay.
we'll just go like that. It'll be easy.
Okay.
Charles,
So, yeah.
would we be able to get a copy of the star that Ben displayed earlier?
I don't know. Ben, do you have a copy of that, or?
I just dropped it in the chat. There's a link in the chat.
Oh,
Okay,
okay.
thanks. And I also think that it's in the, it might be on my YouTube channel.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hey, I got to share
Awesome.
this. Ryan Campbell's right in front of me. She's in the state of Washington. You ready for this?
Mhm.
He's a COVID survivor back when Washington was getting slammed and they didn't have anything to respond to it with. So everybody, round of applause for Ryan. I haven't talked to you in a long time and I thought, oh my gosh, I hope she's okay.
I'm alive,
Oh,
barely surviving this online learning garbage, but yeah,
Really, it is garbage.
I'm the
How's your-
best.
How's your breathing and everything?
It's not the same. So it's still still having some issues. So hopefully it'll get better with time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's good to see you. It's great.
You too.
Everybody, thanks so much again for joining. Ben, of course, thanks for everything. I appreciate everything, and I appreciate all of you for joining us. Have a wonderful night.
Sorry I didn't get to more reading.
Don't forget, tomorrow, Brian Kendall is going to be online. It's the same link that you used to join this one. It'll be for the one that's going to be tomorrow. So I hope you'll join us for that one too. And I did not forget about anybody's professional development certificates. Those are going to happen. I have everybody's information from when you registered. So I'll be using that to send those out. It's just going to show up in your email. It just takes me a couple of days because I have to set some stuff up to make that work. So give me a couple of days. That will be out to you. Well, today is Wednesday. I will try my very best to get them out like Friday and over the weekend. So hopefully everybody will have them by Monday, but no promises there because my system can only send out, I think, 100 at a time. And there's a lot of you. So
Okay,
I will send them out as fast as I can.
And I'm sure Brian will cover the reading piece more. I know that if you want 2.5 hours of me talking a lot slower about reading, it's on my YouTube page.
Yes.
Thank you for coming. Appreciate it.
All right, everybody take care. Have a wonderful night.